What's up guys, Matt Voke. Let's talk about attacking Bitcoin and Ethereum 2.0. We're gonna talk decentralization of proof of stake and proof of work networks. Let's get into it. So proof of work, meaning Bitcoin, if you will, you need to purchase hardware to secure that. So the miners are purchasing these expensive machines and they're finding really cheap electricity to secure and validate those blocks and adding one block on top of another with all those transactions in them. Then they're also recognizing the longest one of those blockchains and they're building on that because that's the version of reality that we all want to agree on. So a 51% attack of taking most of that hash power of that network is going to require you to buy most of the actual hardware in that network to attack it. And one of the good things with Bitcoin in this instance is that it's been time tested and proven and battle hardened. It's simple, it's limited, and it's known, right? So it's not able to do everything, but that's a good thing because it's known exactly what it can and what it can't do. Proof of stake in Ethereum 2.0, if you will, it's a little different. So you're not going to be buying the hardware to secure that network with miners. You're going to be investing essentially, 32 ETH in the network, and you're going to get rewarded with that ETH when you do validate those blocks. There's almost no energy required to do that. And there's slashing penalties if your behavior is nefarious or you go offline for a significant amount of time. You can also do the longest chain voting as well. So a 51 attack in this instance is going to require you to buy more than half of that network in Ethereum, in this case about $12 billion. And it's less battle tested, it's newer, it's more complex, and there's a lot of unknowns to the proof of stake Ethereum 2.0, if you will. So let's go over the current state of proof of work and proof of stake. So proof of work, it's a little different now than Satoshi visioned in the basement mining with your computer. That was very decentralized. Every single person, aka computer, had one vote. Now, due to ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, there's these very expensive pieces of hardware they see in these factories running with very cheap electricity. That's not very decentralized. So as an example, an S19 costs about $6,000 for 110 terahash per second. The payback on that thing with a good power of 10 cent kilowatt hour is going to be about 3 years. That's a long time. If you have a very nice, very cheap power on like a hydroelectric plant, for instance, you're going to be looking at about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, which is great. That reduces your payback on that machine down to 1.5 years. Obviously a pretty significant difference there. So this makes attacks expensive because you need to buy that hardware. However, this is kind of like a rich get richer. Because of that centralization, you need to be a large player. You can't really do this in your garage anymore, kind of. With the current proof of stake, Ethereum Beacon Chain launched in December 1st of 2020, and right now there's about 411 validators. So there's 411 32 ETH block, slot people, if you will, voting on which chain, which block to append to that chain. Right now there's about 99% voting participation rate, which is good. And then you need that 32 ETH to run that validator. So it's not a rich get richer. However, there is great potential for this to be a centralization of Ether. So every validator is just collecting more ETH while they're validating that network. This has centralization to both proof of stake and proof of work concerns, specifically when you're talking about pooling of that hash and that validation. So as you see in the blue and then in the yellow later on, there's some issues where these players get together to form these pools. It's going to be more reliable income, but that can be a large percentage of the actual power that's voting on the next block to append to that network, which can be a challenge. Let's talk about the 51% attack. This is the sexiest attack because you get to double spend what you've done in the past. So if I spent $1 sending something to Alice, then I can also send that same dollar that I gave to Alice to Bob. Obviously not a good thing. So in a proof of work, it's very difficult to do that because you need to buy all that hardware. However, the only thing you can basically do is outweight that double spend. You can choose the shorter chain, but that's very difficult in the consensus in the human domain, very difficult there. You can change the proof of work network when that attack's happening or afterwards, but that would brick everybody's ASICs. And then the longer chain, you could just accept it as truth. When we had the block size wars between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, for instance, the Bitcoin network 1, that was the longest chain. We just accepted that. In proof of stake networks, that 51% attack would see the hackers, stake getting slashed. They would just get rid of the whole stake. The attackers could go buy 32 more, times X, to $12 billion, but then that would get slashed as well. And the whole time they're increasing the, dollar value of Ethereum in this case, because they're just buying more and more and more. So that's the 51%, that's the sexy, but there's some other attacks that are unique to proof of stake as well. So 2/3 of the network validators that are selected in each epoch are required to vote on which version of the block should be appended to that, then it is valid. So if 1/3 of those votes aren't voting or don't agree, then it can stall that network. That's obviously bad. So if that happens, there's what's called an inactivity leak, and that just basically starts draining the Ethereum out of those inactive people. That can take a while. We're talking a week, and that's not good for a blockchain. Attackers can vote on multiple different blocks as well, and that's obviously nefarious, and we don't want that, so you just slash their stake in this case. And then if, let's say, for instance, right now, there's $23 billion securing that ETH 2.0 beacon chain, all you would need is $12 billion to attack that and have it, be recognized as the newest chain. If that, beyond what we just talked about, the 51% attack, you could have the human domain, the network, everybody get together and prevent that with their human consensus as well. Some of those are required, when you're doing a fork, for instance, when you're doing an upgrade and you're having, deliberate improvements in that. So you need that ability. And some takeaways. This is interesting. It's going to be fascinating as this moves forward. Proof of stake is easier for individuals to participate. The economies of scale don't apply to Ethereum like they do for Bitcoin. Yes, you can run that Bitcoin miner in your garage, but it's extremely loud. It's, you need that cheap electricity, so you got to have solar panels or something. And it's just not the same as that massive complex that's right at that hydroelectric plant, for instance. 32 ETH is all you need to mine solo, and you can do that in a pool as well. So there's pluses and minuses. Proof of stake has direct crypto economic incentives for security, whereas in the Bitcoin network, a lot of Bitcoiners will say that the beauty is you need to buy that hardware in the real world, and that hardware in the real world incentivizes you to be aligned with that network. I agree with that 100%. Proof of stake requires less issuance, about 90% less issuance to those miners and validators. And that's awesome. That means that it can either decrease that issuance for the security, or it could even increase the security and keep it the same. In this case, they're reducing that issuance by about 90%. Proof of stake is more complex and may have more bugs in it. Just because the attack surface of all the code and all the things working together is difficult, especially with 5 or 6 different clients. Getting them all to work together, that's definitely difficult. We'll see some challenges along the way. I trust you me. And then proof of stake is also younger, so it's not battle tested the same way that Bitcoin is. Bitcoin has went through some very challenging times, and it's emerged more resilient as a community. Some of the toxicity that we see today is just due to the caustic nature of them having to fight off those challenges over the years and establish what Bitcoin is. So this is the differences between the proof of stake and proof of work networks. This is going to be extremely interesting to see as ETH 2.0 merge comes around. I can't wait. The future is bright. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. This is Matt Voke. See ya.